All right, back. Another Square and Compass podcast episode. It's nice to be doing this again after a few weeks of the more live streams, which I also very much enjoy. But today we are with Arianna Armando. She is the studio coordinator for Parkridge and Glenview of the Core Power Yoga Studios. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
So, May is National Mental Health Month, at least in the States. As part of that, right, Core Power Yoga on their app, which is a great app, by the way, and everybody should check it out, but completely for free, which is a really cool thing, has like a mindfulness, 31-day mindfulness initiative taking place. And it got me thinking, as someone who loves Core Power Yoga, loves the app, and also loves Freemasonry, it got me thinking a lot about how we as Freemasons, and really this could apply to almost any group organization, can incorporate this idea of mindfulness into, events, into meetings, as well as maybe in some ways just into our day-to-day lives. But before we get, too far into the weeds, if you could start just by telling us, what is, to you, to Core Power Yoga, like what is mindfulness? How would you describe that?
Mindfulness is a great technique to incorporate throughout life. And mindfulness can be a lot of things. It can be anything from breath work to movement to journaling. There are many different ways to incorporate it. And it doesn't have to take up that much time of your day, which is great for integrating it into meetings before and after. At Core Power, we integrate mindfulness in yoga sequences through breath work, through intentions on what you can direct your thoughts towards an intention for class and what you want to think about for these next 60 minutes and then carry that into your day. So, mindfulness is a great way to just get down to your thoughts and where you want to direct your attention and how to calm yourself down and be present.
I think for a lot of people, right, to the extent that they may think about mindfulness, they may think about it more in terms of like an individual practice, which certainly, right, it can be something that is done, by oneself. But you even mentioned this, in your answer, this idea of it can be incorporated or it can be part of group exercises, group efforts, meetings, right? Like what do you think the value of mindfulness techniques and practices may be for I mean, say larger, even groups, organizations, meetings of say 10 or more people, right? Where can the what can be the benefits of mindfulness in those settings?
Yes, I think it's very powerful to do mindfulness techniques in a group of people because you're all working together to calm down, to set your intention for the day, for your class, for your meeting. And it's powerful to all like breathe together or direct your intention together to get everyone on the same page and to better each other. And there's just something powerful about the collective being together and doing it together and being vulnerable together and sharing these open spaces together.
Have you found, I mean, even just for me, not somebody who's kind of in the space, the terms like mindfulness, meditation, breathing work, it does seem that it has become more and more prevalent in, um, for lack of a better term, corporate culture or community culture. Like you see more businesses having mindfulness programs for employees. Just from your experience, being more in the field, are you seeing more of an emphasis in the last several years being placed on mindfulness at, again, not the individual level so much, but at the corporate level, businesses, employee wellness, membership wellness, things like that?
I am seeing a shift. I feel as if there's a shift towards wellness recently and well-being and employees being healthier so that they can show up at work. I've seen that people are craving this, people want it, people need it, and it's a necessary function of well-being to perform throughout your day.
And you talked earlier about it doesn't need to take much time. one thing I've been loving about the Core Power Yoga app and the daily mindfulness exercises is I think honestly today's, I'm recording this May 20th, might have been like the longest one at 5 minutes and 12 seconds. They all otherwise seem to have been, between 1 and 2 minutes. Even 5 minutes isn't that long. Is that been kind of a purposeful kind of approach with this act to keep them shorter as a way to encourage people to do them and to just remind people it doesn't need to take up a lot of time, and even if you are very busy you can probably find a minute or two or five for one of these exercises.
100%. Time is a huge thing, and we all are busy. And if you can just take less than 5 minutes out of your day for mindfulness, it's huge. And it doesn't have to be this big thing. And I think that's the power of mindfulness and consistency. Consistency is more important than doing an hour of mindfulness techniques a day. But if you're able to do this every day for less than 5 minutes, it's more effective.
So moving on to the kind of the Masonic side of things, right? If when I think about a Masonic meeting, right, it tends to be older, 50 and up, although we're working on getting those numbers down. So I'm one of the young guys, and we do have a lot of younger guys coming in, but we do have a lot of older members, some of whom may have physical restrictions or mobility impairments, right? Usually meetings will start in the evening, and oftentimes they can be either you have your degree nights, which are you're bringing somebody else into the craft, and those are more, we're calling them degree or ritual nights. But then you have your business meetings, which it's not business in the sense of making money. It's all the administrative tasks that you have to do, right? Whether it be reading correspondence, minutes, paying bills, um, who is sick, whose family is sick, can anybody go visit them, charitable efforts, like all those type of actions, all those administrative tasks. Um, you know, Incorporating a mindfulness practice, and we can talk about some specific ones, as we go on. Um, but what would be some of the benefits to incorporating some mindfulness practices into, let's say, one of these business meetings where, a lot of it is going to be, for lack of a better term, some boring stuff or more the administrative grunt work, right? Starting or maybe finishing with some type of mindfulness. What would be some of the benefits in that type of meeting?
Yes, mindfulness can contribute to calming your mind down, getting you in the correct state to focus. I think when we have a long day of work or anything else and you're coming into a meeting at night, your brain can be jumbled. So it's a way of just focusing and calming down your nervous system and getting you ready to start a new task or get you on track for what you need to do.
That's a really good point, and it's honestly, I feel like you brought something up that I've danced around in previous topics and just in discussions, but never really discussed directly, which is that transitional period, right? One of the challenges I think for a lot of Freemasons is you worked your 9 to 5 or
Mhm.
your 5 to, or whatever it is, your 5 to 5, you worked your shift, and then depending on when the lodge meeting starts, you're rushing from your work maybe to the lodge meeting and finding a time to refocus your energies. Maybe you had a really crappy day at work, or who knows, maybe you're having problems with family, or you've got whatever stressors you've got. Taking a few moments at the start of a meeting, to refocus through a mindfulness technique, I could see that being a real benefit in terms of how the meeting's going to go, because I do know a lot of Masons have talked about the struggle of a full day of work and then having a Masonic meeting, and how do you leave whatever it is you need to leave outside the lodge.
Yes. And it's a skill and it takes practice being able to shift from one thing to the other, be able to let go of everything that's happened from your day. And a great way to practice this skill is through mindfulness techniques.
Well,
It's
I
very
will sorry, I will say though, another which makes me you know, reconsider something, or not reconsider, but kind of reconfirms or reaffirms something I've noticed is a lot of when I joined Freemason in 2007, which is crazy. And at that time, most lodges would have their dinner or their refreshments after the meeting. So you met at 7:30, you might have dinner refreshment around 9:30 or 10. A lot of lodges are now moving to having food and dinner before the meeting starts. And I'm wondering if even that is, I've seen it tend to benefit lodges. In my experience, you're more likely to get a higher turnout if you have dinner beforehand. And I'm wondering if that is, and maybe not purposely so, but an example of this mindfulness in the sense of it gives you, eating with your brothers and relaxing with some food before the meeting starts. It gives you that chance to kind of refocus your mind from the day activities, work, whatever it might be, to your lodge meeting.
That's a great way to think about it. And food gives you energy to think, and I'm sure everyone is really hungry going into these meetings. And being able to talk to people and just kind of forget about your days, a form of mindfulness as well. I like that.
We discussed the idea of consistency, or you mentioned the importance of it. I do also wonder with some of these techniques, um, maybe it can be the Masonic, it can be the starting these techniques at a Masonic lodge for a member can kind of be the jumpstart towards that consistency, right? Because maybe they've got a recommendation from a doctor that they need to lower their blood pressure, try meditation, try breathing, whatever it is. But if you're just by yourself, it can be hard to force yourself to do it. But if the worshipful master of the lodge says, okay, we're going to spend 2 minutes doing this breathing exercise, that can be the thing that jumpstarts you into maybe being more consistent about it outside of the lodge.
Definitely. I actually had this conversation with someone today about it, and they were saying how they would never do breath work by themselves or work out by themselves, but that's why they go to Core Power because it's a community and we're all doing it together. And it forces you to do something that you normally wouldn't do yourself. And it gets you into this habit of doing it and it keeps you consistent. And then over time, you realize, oh, this actually does help when you look back and realize where you were a month ago.
And I do want to stay focused on the start of the meeting or that transitional period. But after we're done that, I do want to move on to maybe if there's a value for something at the end of a meeting as well. But for that start of a meeting, maybe you've gone the approach of having your dinner before, maybe you're still doing dinners after, but 7:30 hits and the meeting has started. After there is the opening of the lodge, right? What are some, possible mindfulness techniques that a worshipful master himself, or maybe he can appoint somebody, right, to incorporate into the start of that meeting for, let's say, between 1 to 5 minutes before you get down to the reading of minutes and everything else that comes with it?
Yes. A couple ones are there's breath work, which is huge. You can do less than 5 minutes of breath work. There's different types. There's alternate nostril breathing. There's boxed breathing, which I can explain. But these are great techniques to integrate right before a meeting to get everyone focused and calm. And then you can do other things like journaling. You can have a prompt and have everyone reflect and think about it and write it down. And that could be something that transitions you into the meeting itself.
What would you let's start with, because it's one that I like a lot, and in some past professions I talked to clients about it. Box breathing. Right? What is that and how does that work?
Box breathing is great. You inhale and then you hold your breath for 4 seconds. And then you exhale and you hold your breath at the bottom for 4 seconds. And then you just keep doing it over and over again. So it's the holding of your breath before you release. And it's very calming for your body and your nervous system, especially after a long day.
And again, it's breathing in, hold for four, breathe out, hold for four.
Yep.
And it can be like, would you say there's an optimal length of time? I think when if I recall correctly, on the app, I think it was like a 3-minute box breathing. But would you say there's optimal length of time, or is it kind of?
I think you can pick and choose. I think anywhere from 1 to 5 minutes is great. And even the 4 seconds of holding, I mean, you can increase this to 5 seconds and then do 5 seconds. So you can pick and choose what works best and what you prefer.
And for any Mason really who thinks this is a good idea, interested in trying to incorporate some of these practices into their Masonic lodge, right? Not to give you an opportunity to sell core power yoga, but nonetheless, what are some resources that they can take advantage of if they want to learn more about how to lead a breathing exercise, or how to even journaling prompts, right? Some
Hmm.
of those resources that might be out there.
Yes, well, there is the Core Power Yoga app, which is free, and that takes you through the month of May is mindfulness, and they offer breathing techniques on there. Um, And even if you want to check out Core Power, there's Core Power on demand classes where they take you through exercises and things like that. So you could definitely utilize the Core Power Yoga app for on demand and for breathing techniques.
So we talked about the breathing exercises, right? And box breathing is one I'm a fan of. um, Back when I was a probation officer. I remember doing that with some of the clients. But I mean, I find it's just helpful for me as well. I'm a big fan of it. As someone who can have a bit of a temper, it's sometimes a good thing to take advantage of and to calm things down. And I can definitely see the value of, at the start of a meeting, spending 2 to 3 minutes doing this breathing to get everybody relaxed and focused on what's in front of them, as opposed to kind of living in whatever their day was, right? That transitional period. The idea of the journaling, what are some of the benefits to journaling, um, for mindfulness? And taking it outside of masonry for a moment, just for yourself, are there any journal prompts that you find are helpful for people when it comes to mindfulness techniques?
Yes, number one, I'd say gratitude. I mean, honestly, focusing on what you're grateful for and writing it down is a great thing to do every day. And number two, just getting your thoughts down on paper. Sometimes we are so jumbled that you don't even realize why you're feeling a certain way, and writing it down, oh, I'm feeling like this, and then why, and then keep writing, keep writing. You kind of get your thoughts down on paper, you kind of get organized, and then once you start to feel organized, you start to be organized. It's just a great way to let everything go instead of keep it all in.
And I mean, I actually did, not to give myself a shout out, but nonetheless, I did, on my Medium page, write a story, which I'll leave a link somewhere in this video. I'll leave a link down in the comments. 10 Masonic journal prompts. So 10 prompts you can use, or your virtual master can use, to suggest to the membership, right, to write a journal. So like, what are 3 things you love about Freemasonry, going back to the gratitude thing? Or what is something that in Freemasonry you struggled with for a long time, but you've since accomplished, right? And how did it make you feel, to whether it be a piece of ritual that was really long, or whatever it might be, right? So I'll leave a link to that.
That's
Um,
awesome. I think
and
those thoughts are very helpful.
yeah, and the journaling thing, even, it can act as potentially a educational program in some ways, or something to make the meetings more interesting, because maybe, you know, the first month the master suggests the prompt, and then the next month somebody presents based on that prompt on what they wrote, or something to that effect, might be a good way to create a more interesting lodge experience.
Yes.
The I used the word there, engagement and ritual. I'm curious, one thing that I know I struggle with personally, and I think a lot of Masons do, not so much when you're new, because you're new and you're excited and you're kind of paying attention to everything, but once you get to 10, 15, 20 years in, if you're in a meeting, especially if it's a degree, and maybe you've seen the ritual or heard the ritual, I probably heard it hundreds of times at this point, right? Trying to keep yourself engaged in the moment and listen to what's being said, and not start thinking about the pile of dirty laundry at home or whatever it is, right? Like, what are some ways that maybe people can try to keep themselves engaged in the moment when their mind, because it's just the repetitive nature of it, their mind is kind of wandering to whatever else they've got going on.
Yes, I think a form of meditation and focusing on your breath can really bring you back to the present moment. So when you're listening to a lecture or information, focusing on your breath and repeatedly like bringing yourself back into this moment is a skill that could be practiced. So if you're starting a meeting with mindfulness, maybe one of the practices is focusing on a meditation for 5 minutes. So closing your eyes and just noticing where your mind is wandering, and then consistently bringing your mind back when you notice it's wandering. And then over time, you start to strengthen this mindset, and it can help you stay more present in meetings and be there, fully there, rather than thinking about, oh, I got to do my laundry later, or I didn't do this earlier.
And there is a um, emphasis on like Masons or Masonic lodges, different jurisdictions, right? But generally speaking, there is a emphasis on also trying to bring more things either into a lodge or get the lodge membership to go, out to different things or different programs, right? I've been lucky enough to, I think it's been 4 classes, 5 classes at Core Power Yoga in Glenview, and I've loved every one of them. But for, if let's say a Masonic Lodge wanted to either invite a yoga instructor in to do some things in their, maybe in their refreshment area or ballroom, different lodges have these big spaces for dancing, things like that. Um, or, go out to something, right? Like, I think for a lot of older members, they may be concerned about their ability to do yoga, or their ability to exercise anymore, right? But I think again, it goes back to this idea of the mindfulness app. It takes these mindfulness initiatives, these daily mindfulness practices are 1 to 5 minutes. In the same way with the exercise, right? It doesn't have to be, it can be something that is tailored, from what I understand, tailored to different abilities, different
Definitely.
ages, right? Different medical requirements.
Definitely. I think we all think yoga needs to look a certain way when in reality, the whole point of yoga is circling back to this mindfulness, circling back to your mind is very powerful and it all stems from your thoughts. And yoga is this practice of co coming back to the present moment, showing up for yourself. It's not necessarily about doing an amazing yoga pose, but more of being there for yourself, doing what you can, and being in the moment. So, yeah, I think Core Power yoga instructors would be willing to come in. We can do events at Core Power. There's many different things we can do to get creative with this.
The and I mentioned Glenview specifically, but core power yogas. And are there any core power yogas in Canada? I know in the States it's all over the place.
That's a great question. I don't think there are.
We don't have core power yoga. We don't have Dunkin' Donuts. You guys in the States are getting all the good stuff. All right. Well, nonetheless, to my brothers in the States, you know, and it doesn't just have to be core power yoga, obviously, but I've always had a great time at their studios, or at their Glenview studio. It's been incredible. But if you don't have one in your town, there's probably a yoga instructor somewhere, right? Something you can do to bring somebody in. I've seen, and watch videos of people doing like seated yoga, where if they can't stand up, they stay seated to do it. So there's a lot of different options out there, and I think it's really worth exploring. So we talked about, you have your start of the meeting, breathing exercises, maybe a journaling prompt during the meeting, ways to kind of keep yourself focused on what's happening and not allowing your mind to wander. What are some of the things you might suggest, or do you think, or what are some of the benefits maybe of engaging in a mindfulness practice at the end of the meeting when when everybody's kind of wrapping up?
I think it's great. I think it's like putting a bow on the end, finishing up a meeting. And there's many ways to do this. You can start a meeting the same way you end a meeting. You can end with breath work. You can end with reflecting. So again, going back to the journaling, but this time reflecting on the meeting and leaving people with the question to leave the meeting to think about for next time they come back. So you can do very similar techniques as the beginning of the meeting, but maybe just shift it more of a reflection or a way to leave feeling calmer and ready for bed.
The hopefully ready for bed. If you're being responsible, if you're like me, you end up at the bar or something. But the the famously in Freemasonry, right? There's the not so satirical uh, cartoon image, or again, not so cartoonish, not so satirical, but there's the famous grumpy past master. He's called, who, his favorite line is, "That's not how we did it in my day," or something to that effect, right?
Mhm.
There can be a pushback against change of any type in Freemasonry. Although having said that, I do think sometimes that is overstated. I found Freemasons tend to be more open to change if it's presented well. So again, if you are interested in, as a Mason, right, if you wanted to try to bring something like this to your Masonic lodge, mindfulness practices, either starting the meeting with breath work or journaling, or ending with the same, or even bringing in a yoga instructor um, to do some things in the lodge, or doing a field trip, for lack of a better term, an outing, because who doesn't love field trips, right? To a yoga studio, to core power yoga, right? What are some of the like what are some of the things you would suggest to the person bringing it up, like to explain the benefits of it, and to get people on board who may be, like I said, grumpy past masters?
Honestly, I think simple is better. I think we don't it doesn't need to you don't need to overcomplicate it. So, pick one prompt, pick one type of breath work, and yeah, and then just stay consistent with it. Less than 5 minutes a day. It's really important.
I think that's probably really, really good advice for life, honestly, but especially for Freemasonry, right? Like, one thing I've noticed in my travels, I travel pretty frequently to different lodges, is usually when something when an initiative fails, or when something is not successful, it's usually because whoever was suggesting it, tried to made it too complicated at the start, or tried to do too much, right? Like, maybe it is a matter of, at the start, you might not convince the lodge at the start to bring in a yoga instructor, but you could probably convince them to try a breathing exercise for 2 minutes. And then as that goes well, you can introduce a journaling prompt, and then you can introduce, core power yoga, or whatever it might be. You can kind
Yes.
of keep things moving. But I have found oftentimes, when it comes to and this is probably true for anything just outside of Freemasonry as well, right? Usually when something doesn't succeed, it's because at the start they try to make it too complicated or too big.
Yes. I like the idea you said about working your way up to more and more. So starting slow, then maybe adding in a yoga instructor down the line. But starting simple is good and then slowly increasing, I think is the best way.
And you talked about it earlier a little bit, but I was wondering, if you could just go over again, kind of from what you've seen and your experiences, the health benefits of, like, we could do both the health benefits of, like, mindfulness techniques in general, but then also combining that with the yoga, and the more, like, not physical in the sense of running marathons, but the more physical, stretching and all that type of stuff as well.
Yes, there's tons of health benefits. I mean, when you integrate mindfulness techniques and yoga and movement, you feel better. Your endorphins in your brain, your dopamine, everything, you feel this euphoric feeling, and I think everyone strives to feel that way. And you're moving energy throughout your body. So when you're breathing, you're bringing oxygen to your brain. You feel better. You have more energy. You feel more awake. You feel rejuvenated. And it's just relieving thing. You just feel like you can let go of something. Like I've had people walk into class and cry after, but like happy tears, like this, they needed that for the day. So it really puts you in a good state of being for the day. It helps you make better choices later in life throughout your day. It just helps you feel better, helps you focus, helps you be a good person. I can go on and on.
No, I mean it's one of those things where it's like love something or you're passionate about something, then everybody can go on and on about whatever that thing is, right?
Exactly.
Like if you start asking me about scary movies, we'll be here for a very, very long time. So I think everybody kind of has that quality when it's something that they love, right? Which is why I like talking to people who about things they're passionate about because you can, the passion kind of comes out. The the I don't want to put this. We talked earlier about like you seeing more of a mindfulness shift or mindfulness focus at kind of the group level, for lack of a better term, right? Like corporations, businesses, outings, things like that. And we talked about how you start at like the group level, but that can bring itself down into the individual level as well. Like if you start something, you know, uh, um, with a group or in a group that you maybe were nervous to try on your own, you're more comfortable trying it on your own later. So you can incorporate breath practices into your day-to-day life after trying it, let's say in a Masonic lodge. And you did touch on that earlier, but I was just wanted to touch a little bit more, right? Do you have a lot of people coming to core power yoga, trying these practices, thinking they might not have enjoyed them or being nervous, and then, finding they keep going afterwards and they keep coming back?
Yes. It could be very intimidating to try something new, something you're not used to. You don't know what to expect. You don't know where to go, what's going to happen. But then when you try it, you're like, "Oh, this was actually fun," or this isn't too bad. And then you keep going back because you're curious, and then you realize that you can use these techniques on your own to help you in your life and to help you keep going.
Yeah, and you know what better place to try something new than with your brothers, right? And with your fellow Freemasons, because if you're worried you're going to look like a fool, we're all going to look like fools, and so we can all look like fools together. But you'll probably be fine. But that is one of the things, right? There's this kind of I'm not a huge fan of the joke myself because I think it misses something important. But there's this kind of joke in Freemasonry. It always goes, George Washington didn't join the lodge to hear the minutes read, or this idea of like which again, maybe it's important to read the minutes, but I think what they're trying to get to with that is, part of being a Freemason is you're joining something to try to improve yourself somehow and try to give yourself something that can make your life better. And so part of that means, Freemasons need to be willing to incorporate some of these things into their lodge meetings, whether it be mindfulness or health, right? It's about taking care of ourselves, not, yes, the work is important and it needs to be done. But if we're not combining that with these other practices that encourage healthy lifestyles and healthy well-being, I do think we are kind of letting our brothers down in some way, or their families, or whatever it might be. So, and I think that's probably true for what you're seeing as well, too, in core power yoga, in the sense that, like, you have to go to work, you have to earn a living, you have to pay your bills, you have to do all these things. But if you're allowing all of those things to affect your ability to lead a healthy life or to take care of yourself, then ultimately, you're kind of doing yourself a disservice to a certain extent, if that makes sense.
Definitely. It all stems from yourself. You gotta be healthy physically, mentally, emotionally in order to be there for other people and to be a good person and to contribute to society. It all
And
stems from yourself.
hopefully then we as Freemasons, when one thing I try to do, right, is we should be, I think, encouraging, not, there is a certain do as I say, not as I do, but I try my best. I'm not always the healthiest, but I try. But we should be encouraging our brothers, I think, and ourselves to be to lead healthier lives, with, exercise, eat well, and engage in these mindfulness, especially when there's so many resources available. Like we talked about it a bunch, but the Core Power Yoga app, the fact that there's all these free resources, these mindfulness, like, take advantage of it. If you're a Mason, check it out. If there's a particular mindfulness day, like the box breathing stuff, where they go through that, write it down in your Masonic journal and bring it up at lodge. Hey, we can try this thing today or something, right? So, yeah, I think we as Freemasons should be encouraging our brothers and ourselves. We got to encourage ourselves as well to be to lead healthier lives. So, thank you so much for being here.
Of
You're
course.
this you're the student coordinator of Park Ridge and Glenview. Is Glenview still open right now, or is it closed for the moment?
It just closed down for 2 weeks for renovations.
All right, we excited to get back in 2 weeks to see the new space.
Oh, yes. It'll be nice.
Yeah, I loved the I had a blast when I was there. Like I'm from Canada, but I'm in Glenview because I got a lot of friends in Glenview. So I'm there probably at this point it feels like every month or every
I
month and
know,
a half.
I feel like I see you. It almost is like you're living here sometimes.
Well, it feels like a Glenview. I think I wrote about it, right? It's like a created home. It's like a second home because I
Yes.
discovered it by accident, but I'm very, very fond of it. And yeah, I got to add a new place I love to it with core power yoga. So that was really, really cool. You guys are pretty prevalent in Illinois, right? Like I think there's a bunch of spots in Chicago and
There's a bunch. They're all over. There's a bunch in the city of Chicago, and then there's a bunch in the suburbs where Glenview is. And then there's a bunch in the many states. You got California, New York, Texas. Yeah, those are the staples.
so yeah, if you are part of a Masonic lodge and you want to try to bring some of this stuff to your lodge, maybe you'll have a core power yoga around you, which is great. Or maybe if not, like there's got to be yoga instructors around your town. I know a lot of
Definitely.
Masonic lodges in smaller towns. I'm sure they could find a yoga instructor. Or I think, you guys also, I'm sure others as well, but you guys also do virtual classes, right?
Yes, they're called on-demand classes, and you could purchase a membership that's just on demand, and you can go online and look up classes and online.
Or would it even be possible if it's a situation where, again, you have, say, majority membership is older, or maybe they, would like to do a specific type of yoga, maybe a type of yoga where they're seated,
Hmm.
um, or whatever, or maybe some of their members are in wheelchairs, so they want everybody to do seated yoga or whatever it is. Like, is it possible to potentially contact Core Power Yoga and like Zoom a lesson or instruction in, or something, if especially if it's a smaller town where maybe they don't have any studios in the
Hmm.
vicinity?
I'm sure you could reach out to a manager of a specific studio, and they can coordinate a Zoom where they can do something like that for sure.
Yeah. And if you are in a town where there is a core power studio or any other yoga studio, consider, they're really pushing it now at a lot of grand lodges, and I think it's right. Consider trying to organize an outing, bring your guys there, right? And
Hmm.
again, if it's older fellas or they need chairs or whatever it is, I'm sure you can sort that out in advance and do some type of group outing, because I
Hmm.
think there is a push. I think it's right. There is a real push now to get more Freemasonry outside of the lodge and more social events, social functions.
Yes.
I heard of a lodge doing axe throwing, but that seems terrifying to me. I don't trust their aim for the life of me. I don't want to give my brothers a pocket knife, let alone an axe. But yoga doesn't seem quite as dangerous. So,
Yep,
uh,
and there's also Core Power doesn't offer chair yoga, but that's another thing to look into, chair yoga. And I know that they offer that in libraries, and some senior living homes have them, but that's also a great option. It's a very popular thing.
yeah, no, my pops, he lives in like an apartment complex, but it's for older individuals. They have a lady come by, and it's not like fully seated, but it's one of those things where you can do it sitting down or you can do it kind of standing up. But it's very low impact, obviously, because my dad is an old man, um, as is everybody there, right? So I think the key is, right, there's always kind of a way to make things work, if you want to give it a shot. And again, that's not to say you start but with suggesting a yoga outing. Maybe you start by suggesting a 2-minute breathing exercise, and then you build from there.
Yes, I
But
agree.
thank you so much for being here. Like I said, I have nothing but fun memories of Glenview, and Core Power Yoga is a huge part of that. So thank you so much, and
Thank
thank you
you.
for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And I don't know when I'm going to be back in Glenview next, but I think probably in June. So maybe we'll get to see the newly renovated studio. I'm sure it'll be awesome.
Yes, the studio reopens June 2nd.
June 2nd. All right. Well, thank you so
Mark your
much.
calendar.
Everybody out there watching this, I feel like I got a lot of Glenview viewers on the podcast because I love the Glenview Masonic Temple. Apropos of nothing, Glenview Masonic Temple is an awesome space, by the way. So I love that spot. I love that. One of my favorite Masonic buildings anywhere. And it's got a huge like basement refreshment area. You could easily move some tables, set up some yoga mats in there, guys. I'm just
There you
saying.
go.
All right. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you.